that we'll be debating over the next 2 days. And I would now first like to call on Mr. Werner, the President of the European Investment Bank, to make his address. Thank you.
Mr. President, Governor, Presidents, Ministers, Commissioners, Mayors, representatives of the communities, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure and honor for me to be here today. And let me make a personal remark. In the mid-90s, I was the negotiator for one of the member states on the Treaty of Amsterdam, and the newly established Committee of the Regions was to be negotiated into the treaty, and I must say the baby has developed well. It has become an impressive adult now, and I congratulate the President and your team to this wonderful and very impressive conference. And I congratulate you also for choosing this title for your summit, European Recovery, Local Solutions. In fact, yes, after 7 years of crisis, we see first signs of recovery almost everywhere in Europe. We see a light at the end of the tunnel, and it seems to be a light that is not a train coming from the opposite direction. We see that the decline of the GDP in those member states who are hit the worst by the crisis has been stopped, and we expect an increase in GDP in the coming years. Unit labor costs are converging, exports are increasing, the costs for the refinancing of public sector are much less than some years before. Ireland, one of the so-called program countries, is back on the financial markets. Portugal will follow soon, and hopefully Greece one day as well. But we are still not where we want to be, because all of these good news now have to translate into realities on the ground, and nobody should be sure that we are around the corner safely before the effects are going to be felt on the labor markets. And what a painful journey it has been. No one better than you, the representatives of the regions, cities and municipalities, know what this crisis has meant and is still meaning to the people. And to be quite honest, I do not want to be in your role. When we talk on EU level about youth unemployment, about the lack of access to finance for small and medium-sized enterprises, about the need of doing more for public infrastructure, schools, hospitals, roads, railways, water sanitation or other sectors, we sometimes forget that the reality is much harder to handle than the statistics. You are facing these problems every day, and you are the ones looking for solutions on the ground. And that is, in fact, what counts, and where all the measures that are being cooked on the EU or national level have to pass the reality check. Ladies and gentlemen, for a convinced European like me, one of the most disastrous effects of this crisis is the backlash in one of the basic ideas of European integration, and that is convergence. By the way, since the Treaty of Rome, one of the objectives set out for the EU bank, the European Investment Bank, which has been based on the Treaty of Rome and is a part of the Treaty of Rome, and now, of course, Lisbon. Convergence and subsidiarity. These have always been two principles that Europe has been proud of for very good reasons, because they clearly define one of our major objectives in Europe, and that is that Europe comes closer together in terms of economic wealth, while leaving the decisions on those levels where solutions must be found, and that is as close as possible to the people. In times of crisis, we have seen that both principles were pushed back. Disparities between member states, between regions and cities in Europe have never been that high in terms of unemployed citizens or the need for private and public investments. Most of Europe's so-called periphery lost a significant part of its GDP, up to 25% in Greece, and large parts of its young qualified workforce emigrated. The demographic challenges, particularly felt at the periphery, risk putting more pressure on the sustainability of welfare systems. The less affluent regions of Europe are in many cases emerging from this crisis even poorer and less competitive as compared with the richer. And ladies and gentlemen, we see a tendency of more and more centralized instruments may be understandable in some cases, but all in all a dangerous tendency that needs to be reversed as soon as possible. Because the basic idea of convergence and subsidiarity as guiding principle is still valid. Ladies and gentlemen, the European Investment Bank, the EU bank, has a special role to play. A public bank, as we are, owned by the 28 member states, is of course looking for financial strength and stability in order to provide cheap loans where they are needed. But we are not acting like a private bank for which revenue is the top priority. Consequently, we are only active where we are most needed and where you do not find alternatives on other markets. The EIB is closely assisting the Union's regional policy, in which the urban dimension plays a more prominent role in the new programming period. The President has referred to that. We assist in three principal ways: by way of lending to priority projects, blending loans with EU funds, and by advisory services, notably technical and financial assistance. As regards our lending and specifically blending activities, our structural program loans, whereby EIB co-finances EU grants, amounted to some 19.5 billion of co-financing in 2007 to 2013 programming period. This translates into a total project cost of almost 200 billion euros. Let me give you a specific example of such a loan. In Greece, EIB provided a structural program loan of 2 billion euros for co-financing the Greek National Strategic Reference Framework, NSRF, which focuses on small and medium projects with high capillarity throughout all Greek regions. The EIB complemented finance with technical and advisory assistance on improving project risks and implementation, with experts seconded to the Greek administration. The component financed by the bank, by far the most successful of the Greek NSRF, brought to light the potential of projects by local promoters, the advantages of multi-layer cooperation, and the identification of many best practices in regional and local projects, which were documented and will hopefully be reproduced in 2014 to 2020. This collaboration is now followed in Portugal through monitoring cooperation. As regions and their cities are key to the development of EU, the EIB supports the territorial and urban agenda by financing programs and projects at regional and municipal level. By the way, more and more. In 2007 to 2013, we signed over 300 operations, as a matter of fact 317, representing about 55 billion euro in lending, contributing to 175 billion euro of total program investment cost. These operations, these loans, relate to projects managed at the urban or municipal and regional level and provide coherent support by way of a holistic and integrated approach to investments to a wide range of sectors such as education, water, training, social and health facilities, wastewater, solid waste, RDI, SMEs, sustainable urban transport, cultural heritage and climate issues, not the least climate resilience. Financial instruments like Jessica further contribute to urban development by assisting authorities in regions receiving structural funds to support investment in sustainable urban development more effectively. There were 37 urban development funds at the end of 2012 with a total volume of around 1.4 billion euro. A number of other initiatives like Jeremy, allowing the member states to use part of structural funds to finance SMEs by means of equity, loans or guarantees through a revolving holding fund. Elena, that helped local and regional authorities make investments in energy efficiency and renewable energy, and not the least, JASPERS, to assist in better preparing projects supported from structural and cohesion funds. All this is in place. The outcome of all these initiatives are projects like the metros here in Athens or in Sofia, waste management projects in the UK, or instruments for small and medium-sized enterprises on the ground, in the communities, in the region. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to continue to work on the recovery of Europe, and as you have rightly chosen as the motto for your summit, based on local solutions. And let me add one final message. We are stuck now for 7 years in crisis management. And whether it's tough or sometimes almost hardly imaginable in view of the challenges that you have to meet every day, there will be a life after the crisis. And that life after the crisis will show that over the last 7 years you have dramatically reduced investment. We are still 15% below the investment level of 2007 in the European Union. And in view of a huge gap between innovative activities in Europe, research, development, innovation in general, but also in education, we run the risk of really losing our competitive advantage in the global context. And the world around us is moving very, very quickly. So we better make sure that we successfully master this crisis, but then also look forward and prepare for the future of Europe. And there, I believe, the municipalities, the cities, the regions are going to play a very decisive role, not least by organizing this cooperation, this confluence of ideas between universities, between small and medium-sized industries, between big corporates and the public authorities on the ground. Thank you very much for your attention and good luck for this Congress.
Mr. Hoyer, thank you very much for that. And now it's time to hear from our second keynote speaker, Mr. Evangelos Venizelos, the Deputy Prime Minister of Greece and its Minister for Foreign Affairs.
President of the Committee of Regions, President of the Greek regions, Governor, Commissioner, Ministers, members of the European Parliament, members of the Greek Parliament, President of the European Investment Bank, guests from other member states of the European Union, representatives of European cities and European regions. I would like to welcome you with great joy indeed on behalf of the Greek government, but also on behalf of the Greek presidency of the Council. I would like to welcome you to Athens, to this ever so interesting summit of regions and cities. As you know, the priorities of the Greek presidency during this semester is dealing with the major priorities, the most pressing priorities of all citizens, European citizens. So, development, growth, creation of jobs, maintaining social cohesion, dealing with the horrific consequences, the problem, first of all, and consequences of unemployment among youth. In Greece, we have figures of over 60%, supporting small and middle-sized enterprises, the recovery of the European economy, and of course that has particular importance for countries in crisis, countries which are feeling the consequences of an archaic model for growth and development in Europe. We're speaking about the countries of the South, countries which are in support programs. Greece is #1 among those. Greece is truly the laboratory in which we find an experiment taking place. In other words, we're trying to see how resilient European institutions are. The question is, how resilient are they indeed? What is the future? What is the future of European integration? That's what comes out of all of this. So our #1 priority, obvious of course, is development and the creation of jobs. And this of course concerns, first of all, the real economy, the funding of enterprises and undertakings, particularly SMEs. SMEs, a major source of jobs, and the majority of Greek workers work in SMEs. And this isn't only applicable in Greece, it's applicable everywhere in Europe. So without a strong financial sector, without the recapitalization of the systemic banks in Europe, we cannot in reality use the implements that the European construct has at its disposal, the cohesion funds, the structural funds, and the other similar such funds. And of course, one of those is represented by Mr. Hoyer here, the European Investment Bank. We cannot use these tools and implements because the great problem that we confront in Europe, the problem which is an impediment to cohesion and of course, this is a major issue indeed. We're speaking about a major rift created by great imbalances in society. And as far as the Greek real economy goes and other peripheral economies of Europe, there are two major imbalances. The one concerns the cost of money, the high interest rates for credits, which are a hindrance to SMEs and cut them off from a real source of funds and possibilities, which means, of course, creation of jobs and growth that they do not have access to. And secondly, energy, the energy issue, which is of great concern for us here in Greece as well, a great imbalance which has to be overcome if we want there to exist a real single market, a single market with equal opportunities for growth, and if we do indeed want convergence within the European Union. This is absolutely necessary. There's no doubt whatsoever, ladies and gentlemen, that the implements that we have in our hands, the various development funds, the structural funds, the new period that we find ourselves in right now, the ability to use all of these possibilities, the regional programs, the regional business programs, of course, are very important as well, and they will be initiated in the next programming period. These will allow for our country to recover, to reacquire its kind of sense of self-confidence and reacquire that sense of some institutional place in Europe, emerge from this situation of total insult within which we find ourselves. But for us to achieve all of this, and for us to be able to use the funds and the various funding instruments of the European Union and the possibilities provided by the European Investment Bank, what we need are certain basic preconditions to have been met within the real economy. Number one, stopping the unjust discussion of the various stereotypes of Greeks and of this country, Greece. Let us not forget that after 7 years of unemployment, of recession, a drop in the standard of living, there is one real achievement, and that is the primary surplus that was marked in the beginning of this year. A real surplus which gives us the opportunity to say that we are indeed moving towards financial balance, towards a more stable financial situation. And a shed of light, a glimmer of light as far as the possibility of some sort of sustainable growth and sustainable financial stability overall. And undoubtedly, we will thus be able to move forward in a more structured, stable financial environment. And let us not forget that Klaus Renglin, the head of the European Stability Mechanism, with whom we had the opportunity 3 years ago to co-sign in Brussels the support agreement for the Greek economy, which would provide for Greece and, of course, for Europe as a whole. Well, it has indeed borne fruit. It was a win-win deal for all, for our European partners and for us as well. Here in Greece, major changes have taken place. The situation has changed drastically. We have we have creative tools which have been deployed, a brighter future, of course. There have been great sacrifices as well, but Greece will now be able to emerge as a real economy through these possibilities, through these funding possibilities, through a kind of bringing together of banking and non-banking sources, which reduce the average interest rate and which allow for the private sector, for SMEs to finally take out those loans they need and finally provide that real impetus for the Greek economy, that real impetus for the future, using all those possibilities that this country has. Because the endogenous, if you like, sources for development exist. They do exist. The people, the land, our soil, our islands, our sea, our natural wealth, and the intellectual capacity of this country. These are the endogenous, these are the domestic sources that we can use in order to move forward effectively into the future and create a competitive, a realistic, post-industrial economy and society, a society which uses the advantages which it has at its disposal. They're so obvious, they emerge, they come out of our history, our geography, our topography. So a real new understanding of the conditions that exist and of the ways that exist in order to emerge from the problems that have existed in the past. It is now possible for us to win back all that we've lost over these last years, all that time that has been wasted. The moment has come to really re-emerge on strong standing. Ladies and gentlemen, we're preparing ourselves right now in Greece. In May, parallel to the European Parliament elections, we will also be having municipal and regional elections in this country, local elections. On the 18th and the 25th of May, Greek European citizens are invited to make essential choices for anything that concerns structures above the state and below the state. Also, choices about Greece in Europe, Greece's position in Europe, and of the role that cities and regions will play in Greece as well. Major choices are to be made by Greek citizens. And this is a very interesting, a very attractive opportunity for us to speak about Europe, not only at the intergovernmental level, where things are usually decided, but at the intercity and interregional level as well. So of great importance indeed, it is for us to discuss the role of cities and regions within this overall model. Once again, based on real facts, on real events, on a reality, a concrete reality. For centuries now, the issue of cities and regions has always been intertwined with the social issue as well. And in Greece, we have to confront a new social situation, new forms of poverty, unemployment which is totally an assault on our society. So we have to change things in order to create real cohesion. In the 19th century, Europe was discussing its social model for the future. It was discussing cities then as well, and regions, and the role that cities and regions would play in the future. That was discussed in the 19th century. Once again, we have to revisit this, rediscuss these issues, and redefine the role of of cities, of regions, of local authorities, and of the role that local authorities can play in creating real social cohesion. There are major challenges before us, major challenges for our country, major challenges for each one of our citizens. So we're looking at those domestic resources and sources. We're looking for those that creative force, those resources that exist here. And when we say here, we're speaking about the municipal level, the regional level, institutions which will have to bear on their shoulders major responsibilities. And here, of course, is subsidiarity, because it is only thus that we'll be able to see the role of a society of citizens and the role of the private sector, of undertakings, of enterprises there, because it's not only politics, it's not only the state. It is not only institutions, political institutions at the local and regional level. It is the individual. It is how society and how it is able to function and work within this institutional framework. So society is being challenged right now as far as the values which are swirling around in the air. Greek citizens, young Greek citizens, cannot accept Europe as a Europe of bureaucracy, of austerity, of unemployment. They want less red tape, they want less politics, they want fewer discussions and more implementable programs, action, concrete things that people can see. They want to really see democracy. They want to see social cohesion. They want to see justice. They want to see innovation. They want to see research. They want to see competitiveness under newly defined conditions. So in other words, we have to recreate or redefine the future of Europe on the basis of the history of this continent. In an environment of crisis which has to be transformed into something else, a Europe of future, a Europe of possibilities, a Europe where light is shed indeed. And we have to be able to tell our peoples, our citizens, particularly our young people, we have to be able to deliver this message of the importance of this architecture and the importance of the role of each citizen within this architecture and the hope that exists there as well. This is the message we have to convey if we want to achieve a truly successful, bright future. Thank you.
Mr. Venizelos, thank you very much for that. And we will have a debate and hopefully get lots of your views. So I'm sure already you may want to take up some of the points of our speakers and put to them when we start the debate a little bit later. But now, though, it's time to hear about some of the key conclusions from the committee